Ever wondered how a single act of kindness could change lives forever? Young Waitress offered her sandwich to a little girl on the street, didn't know her father was a millionaire. And the wind cut sharp down the narrow street, chasing dry leaves across the cracked sidewalk. The sun had already disappeared behind the low buildings of the small town, casting everything in a dull gray. Street lamps flickered to life, their glow barely warming the cold dusk air. Megan pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as she stepped out of the diner. Her shift was over, and her feet ached from the double she had just worked. The scent of grilled onions still clung to her apron, which she had forgotten to take off in her hurry to get home before dark. In her hand was a brown paper bag, warm with the last sandwich left in the kitchen, her dinner. She walked slowly, her breath visible in the air as she passed the corner of Maple and 6th. Something tugged at the edge of her vision. A child sitting on the curb, knees tucked to her chest, hair tangled in loose curls that framed a smudged, pale face. She could not have been more than 4. Her thin jacket hung off her small shoulders, too big and too cold for the weather. Megan stopped. The girl did not move. She knelt down, careful not to startle her. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were wide, a brilliant green dulled by exhaustion. Her lips were cracked. Her cheeks streaked with something that might have been dirt or dried tears. "I'm just waiting," the little girl said softly. "Mommy's gone." Megan's heart clenched. "Gone where?" "She said she'd come back, but she didn't." "How long have you been here?" The girl blinked slowly. "I don't know. I'm not supposed to move. I was good." Megan looked up and down the street. No adults in sight. No bags, no stroller, no trace of anyone else. She opened the paper bag and pulled out the sandwich. Turkey and cheese still warm. Her own stomach growled. But she broke it in half, then broke the bigger piece again and handed 2/3 to the little girl. "Here," she said, "you look hungrier than me." The girl hesitated, then took it with both hands, handling it like it might disappear. She took a bite, then another. Her eyes fluttered shut, and a sound escaped her lips. A sigh so small, so grateful, it nearly broke Megan's heart. "What's your name?" Megan asked, her voice gentle. "Sophie." "Well, Sophie," Megan said, sitting on the curb beside her. "My name's Megan, and I think we should get you somewhere warm." Could this simple act lead to an unexpected twist? Sophie didn't answer, just kept eating like the world might end before she finished. Megan looked at the little girl beside her, this fragile figure bundled in a jacket that did nothing, clutching a sandwich like it was gold. She felt the weight of her own life, of bills unpaid, of second-hand coats, of long shifts and short nights, but none of it compared to what she saw in Sophie's eyes. She didn't know where the child came from. She didn't know what had happened to her mother, but one thing was clear. She couldn't leave her here. As the sky darkened and the cold pressed harder against her skin, Megan pulled off her scarf and wrapped it around Sophie's shoulders. Sophie looked up with startled eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Megan smiled softly. She did not know it yet, but that moment, that simple choice, would unravel everything she thought she knew, and it would change the course of her life forever. Megan had sat with Sophie on that cold curb for nearly an hour. The sandwich was long gone, but the child remained quiet, curled close to Megan's side, her head occasionally dropping against Megan's arm before jerking back up as if afraid to fall asleep. "Do you know your mommy's phone number?" Megan asked gently. Sophie shook her head. "Do you remember where you live?" Again, the little girl shook her head. Her lower lip quivered. "What did your mommy say when she left you?" Sophie's voice was barely audible. "She said, just wait. She said to be good and wait and she'd come back." Megan swallowed hard. The street had grown darker. She knew she couldn't sit out here any longer, not with a child who was clearly lost, cold, and too small to be alone. She stood slowly, then bent down and extended her hand. "All right, Sophie, let's go somewhere warm." "Okay." Sophie looked up, then reached out and wrapped her tiny fingers around Megan's. That was all the answer she needed. Megan's apartment was a tiny unit above the hardware store. One room, a kitchenette, and a shared bathroom down the hall. She hadn't planned on guests, let alone 4-year-old ones. She turned the heater up, plugged in the electric kettle, and set Sophie on a second-hand chair with a soft throw blanket. The child was filthy, mud on her shoes, grime on her cheeks. Megan found a spare t-shirt that might work as a nightgown and filled a plastic tub with warm water. She didn't have toys or bubble bath, but she made do. "I'm going to help you get cleaned up." "All right, just like a little princess." Sophie didn't protest. She let Megan wash the dirt from her arms, untangle her curls, even scrub her fingernails. She looked up at Megan like she wasn't used to this, like no one had done this in a long, long time. Megan kept her voice light. "You know, I once met a dragon. Not a scary one. He liked cookies. But only oatmeal raisin." Sophie blinked, eyes wide. "Really? Really? I had to promise him a whole box just to get him to fly me over the rainbow." Sophie giggled. The sound lit up the room like sunshine. Later, Megan handed her a warm mug of milk and wrapped her in a blanket on the bed. She dialed the local police department with her phone tucked in the bathroom, whispering so Sophie wouldn't hear. "Yes, I found a child. 4 years old, alone, says her name is Sophie." "No, she doesn't know her last name. She said her mother told her to wait." "Yes, we're safe. We're at my apartment. Please keep me posted if someone reports her missing." She returned to the room to find Sophie fast asleep, curled into a tight ball in the middle of the bed, clutching the scarf Megan had wrapped her in earlier. Megan stared for a long moment. Then she quietly spread a folded blanket on the floor beside the bed, laid down with a pillow under her head, and turned off the light. She could not explain why. Maybe it was the way Sophie had looked at her. Maybe it was the trust in that tiny hand wrapping around hers. Maybe it was just right. Just before drifting off, she felt a soft whisper in the dark. "Night, Miss Sandwich." Megan smiled in the dark. "Good night, Sophie." She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she knew she had done the right thing. The Grayson estate sat on the edge of the city, a modern fortress of glass and steel, surrounded by manicured lawns and silence. But within its walls, the silence was never peaceful. It echoed. It ached. Daniel Grayson sat at his desk, fingers motionless on the keyboard, eyes fixed on the screen, but not seeing it. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Another day had passed without her. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. His once sharp features were worn now, eyes hollow from sleepless nights, stubble growing in patches on his jawline. The world still called him a genius. The market still worshipped his business acumen. But behind closed doors, Daniel was just a man, a broken one. Since the accident that had taken his wife a year ago, he had been drifting. And since Sophie had disappeared 3 months ago, he had been drowning. She had been with him in the park that day, he remembered every detail. The way she had giggled chasing pigeons. The way she tugged on his pant leg asking for ice cream. Then his phone rang. An investor from Tokyo. Just 2 minutes, he told himself. 2 minutes. And he looked away. When he looked back, she was gone. The police had searched. Private investigators combed through footage, bus routes, tips from half the state. Nothing. She had vanished. Every night since, Daniel followed the same ritual. He would climb the stairs to Sophie's room, open the door quietly as if afraid to wake her, though the bed had been empty for 90 days. He would sit in the small white rocking chair beside the bed, turn on the little nightlight shaped like a star, and stare at the space where she should have been. Her drawings were still on the wall, stick figures holding hands, one of them labeled Daddy. Her tiny shoes sat side by side near the window. The smell of her shampoo lingered faintly on her pillow. He would pick up Mr. Hops, her favorite stuffed bunny, and bury his face in it, letting the weight of the day, the guilt, the emptiness crash down on him. And every night he whispered the same words. "Daddy's sorry, Sophie. Daddy should have never looked away." The house staff knew. No one touched Sophie's room. It remained exactly as she'd left it. Any suggestion of packing things up had been met with silence or a look so hollow it chilled the air. Grief had not made Daniel angry. It had made him absent. Present in body, missing in soul. He attended meetings, gave speeches, signed deals, but the fire behind his eyes had dimmed. Nothing mattered until tonight. He had been scrolling through messages from a local detective when a new alert popped up. Unconfirmed child sighting, Maple and 6th, female, approximate 4 years old. He almost didn't click it. These alerts came in dozens each week, but something about the timestamp drew his eye. He opened the file, a still image, then a short video, a sidewalk, a young woman with blonde hair kneeling beside a child, and then that child turned to the camera, wide green eyes, brown curls tangled down her face, a smear of dirt on her cheek. Daniel froze. His hand shook as he reached for his coffee, knocking the mug over. It shattered on the tiles, spilling warmth across the pristine floor. But he didn't move, didn't blink. It was her. Sophie. She was alive. She was eating a sandwich handed to her by a stranger. But she was smiling. It hit him all at once. Relief so overwhelming he had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling out of his chair. Tears rose without warning. She was alive. Daniel stood, grabbing his coat, barking into the intercom for his driver, his head already racing. Not just because she was found, but because in that fleeting clip, Sophie had looked safe, not frightened, not hurt, and the woman beside her, the one who had knelt down, wrapped her in a scarf, held her hand, had looked at her with a kind of gentleness that Daniel had not seen since his wife passed. He didn't know who she was, but she had given his daughter a smile in the middle of the dark, and Daniel Grayson would find her tonight. The fluorescent lights in the small-town police station buzzed faintly above Megan's head as she sat stiffly in a plastic chair, her arms wrapped around Sophie, who clung to her like ivy on stone. The little girl's face was flushed with confusion and fear, her fists tight around the fabric of Megan's sweater. Megan's heart pounded in her chest. She had done everything right, or so she thought. She had called the police when Sophie still could not recall her address or a phone number. She had stayed calm, answered their questions, offered tea. But the moment the officer had radioed something about a potential abduction, her blood ran cold. 2 more officers arrived within minutes. She could tell by the way they glanced at Sophie, then at her, that they were suspicious, polite, but on edge. I found her sitting alone outside a closed pharmacy, Megan explained for the 4th time. She was cold. She was hungry. She didn't know where her mom was. I couldn't just leave her there. She says you brought her home with you, one officer asked, flipping through notes. Megan nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, because she had nowhere else to go. I called you as soon as I could. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. Before the officer could respond, the door to the station opened. Megan turned as footsteps echoed on the tiled floor, and there he was, the man from the video, tall, broad-shouldered, with storm-gray eyes that scanned the room like a hawk. His presence sucked the air from the space. He walked with purpose, a man accustomed to command and to loss. Their eyes met. His gaze froze on Sophia, then flicked to Megan, and something unreadable passed across his face. He walked straight to the desk. I'm Daniel Grayson. I was told my daughter was found. One of the officers stood quickly. Yes, sir. The child matches the photo. We were just confirming a few details. I'll take her now. Megan's heart stuttered. Sophie's head snapped toward the voice. Her eyes widened. Daddy. Daniel's breath hitched. Hi, baby. She didn't move. She just held tighter onto Megan. One of the officers approached gently. Mr. Grayson, we were about to arrange the transfer, but Sophie seems attached. Daniel's expression didn't change. She's my daughter. Megan opened her mouth. I wasn't trying to keep her. Daniel raised a hand, not to silence her, but simply to steady the moment. I know. His tone was cool, not cruel, controlled. But Megan could see it in his eyes. She was afraid. Afraid to lose her again. He wasn't angry at Megan. He was terrified of what he had already lost once. She wouldn't tell me her last name, Megan continued softly. She didn't know where she lived. She said her mommy was gone. I just wanted to help. Sophie looked between them, her tiny fingers trembling. She turned to Megan and whispered, "Do I have to go?" Megan felt her throat tighten. "Your daddy's here now. He's been looking for you. He loves you so much." Sophie's lip quivered. "But I don't want to leave you." Daniel's jaw clenched. The silence in the room stretched. Then Daniel stepped forward, kneeling slowly, so he was eye level with Sophie. He didn't reach for her. He didn't force her hand. He just looked at her. Really looked. And then his eyes shifted to Megan. That was when he saw it. A worn diaper bag beside Megan's chair, overstuffed, it seemed, strained from too much use. Diapers, wipes, a baby bottle half filled with juice, a little pink hairbrush, everything a child needed, gathered hastily, lovingly. His expression softened, his shoulders dropped. He looked up at her, voice low. "Thank you," he said, "for keeping her warm." Megan blinked, stunned, then nodded, trying to hide the tear that slipped down her cheek. Daniel turned back to Sophie. "Sweetheart, it's okay. You can come home now." Sophie didn't answer, but she slowly unwrapped one arm from Megan and reached toward her father. Daniel lifted her gently as if she might vanish. She buried her face into his neck, small and tired. As they turned to leave, Daniel paused beside Megan. "I owe you more than I can say," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You saved her." Then he walked out, carrying Sophie close, her little hand still clutching the scarf Megan had wrapped around her days ago. Megan sat in the empty chair long after they were gone, staring at the door. She had no idea that her part in Sophie's story was only just beginning. The bell above the diner door chimed softly, but Megan didn't look up right away. It was the middle of her Tuesday morning shift, the lull between breakfast and lunch. Only a few regulars sat at the counter sipping coffee and flipping through newspapers. She wiped down a table, her mind elsewhere, still replaying the events of the past few days. Sophie's sleepy voice calling her Miss Sandwich. The way she had clung to her shirt at the station. Daniel's final words before he carried her away. "You saved her." Megan swallowed the lump rising in her throat. When she finally looked up, her breath caught. There at the corner booth sat Daniel Grayson. Same dark coat, same guarded posture. His hands were folded on the table, a half-empty cup of black coffee in front of him. He was staring out the window, expression unreadable, as if he were waiting for something or someone. He didn't speak when she approached to refill his cup. He gave a polite nod, murmured a thank you, and returned to his silence. She watched him from behind the counter, puzzled. 1 hour passed, then 2. Still, he sat there, not touching his food, not looking at his phone, just watching the street. Megan tried to ignore the growing flutter in her chest. At the end of hour 3, he finally stood. Without a word, he placed a folded note and a business card on the table beneath his untouched coffee mug. Then he turned and walked out. Megan waited until the door closed behind him before approaching. She unfolded the note with shaking fingers. "I owe you more than thanks. Would you consider tutoring and helping Sophie get her mind right? D.D." Her fingers trembled. The card was thick, engraved with his name and a direct number. For a long time, she just stood there staring at the words. That evening, she called. And the next morning, she found herself standing in front of the Grayson estate, an intimidating glass-walled home that looked like it belonged in a magazine, not reality. A security guard met her at the gate, asked for her name, and nodded before letting her through. Daniel opened the door himself. His face was as unreadable as ever, but this time there was something different in his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside. Megan nodded. "I wasn't sure I should." "I wasn't sure I should ask," he admitted. The silence stretched, then broke with a familiar voice. "Megan." Sophie came racing down the hallway, arms outstretched. Her curls bounced and her face lit up like the sun. Megan dropped to one knee just in time to catch her. "You came?" Sophie cried, wrapping her arms around Megan's neck. "I did," Megan whispered, holding her tight. "I missed you, kiddo." Daniel stood back watching them. Later, they sat in the family room, the three of them on a plush carpet surrounded by puzzles and crayons. Sophie insisted Megan help her build a tall tower out of blocks. Megan pretended not to know what she was doing, letting Sophie correct her, giggling every time the tower leaned to one side. Daniel sat on the couch nearby, silent, his elbows resting on his knees. He didn't speak much, but he didn't look away either. His eyes followed every movement, every time Megan gently tucked Sophie's hair behind her ear, every laugh, every small victory when the puzzle pieces finally clicked. And in that quiet moment, he saw something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. It was not loud or grand. It was a whisper, a possibility. As Sophie leaned into Megan's side, proudly showing off her crayon drawing of a unicorn, Daniel's gaze softened just a little, and Megan, catching that glance across the room, knew she wasn't just there for Sophie anymore. She was starting to matter to him, too. Days passed in weeks. Megan fell into a rhythm that no longer felt like borrowed time. Each morning, she arrived at the Grayson estate by 9 a.m., greeted by the same warm-faced housekeeper, the winding halls, and the familiar, excited voice of Megan from Sophie. Their days began with reading, followed by puzzles, art, and math games. Megan had no degree in education, but she gave Sophie something else. Love, presence, joy. And under that light, the little girl began to bloom. Her laughter rang louder. Her sleep deepened, undisturbed by nightmares. Then came dinners. At first, Megan politely declined. Daniel gently asked her to stay. Eventually, it became routine. 3 chairs around a table once used only for formality. The kitchen felt less like a museum and more like a home. Megan started cooking. Just simple meals. Grilled cheese casseroles from memory. Soft rolls with melted butter. Somehow they made the silence around them feel full instead of empty. One evening, Daniel arrived home late. A plate waited for him in the oven, still warm. Next to it, a napkin folded like a bunny with a note. "Don't forget Sophie aced her alphabet today. Be proud." He stared at it longer than he meant to. Then he smiled. He began to find more of them. Encouraging messages tucked into Sophie's lunchbox, each paired with a folded napkin shaped like a swan or a fox. Little gestures, never for attention, just quiet reminders that someone cared. Daniel rarely commented, but Megan noticed how he lingered after dinner, how his voice softened when reading bedtime stories, and when their eyes met, he stopped looking away. Then Sophie got sick. It began with a cough, then a fever. Megan didn't hesitate. She stayed, holding Sophie's hand through the night, cooling her brow, whispering stories in the dark. Daniel stood in the doorway, silent, anxious. By midnight, Sophie still tossed and murmured. Megan didn't leave her side. Daniel disappeared down the hall. Hours later, Megan found a small tray outside the bedroom, a bottle of orange juice, 2 granola bars, a folded napkin shaped like a tiny dog, and a note written in Daniel's clean script, "For you, in case you forget to take care of yourself, too." Tears welled in her eyes. She sat with Sophie until the fever broke just before dawn. When she stepped out of the room, Daniel was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, eyes closed. He looked like he hadn't slept either. She sat beside him. Neither spoke. After a long while, he murmured, "She's lucky to have you." Megan shook her head. "I'm lucky to have her." They didn't need to say more. The quiet between them was enough. Later that morning, Megan went home to change, but she came back that afternoon as always, and this time when she stepped through the front door, it didn't feel like arriving at someone else's house. It felt like coming home. It began with whispers and tabloids. A grainy photo taken from across the street. Megan and Daniel walking side by side after dinner. Sophie between them holding both their hands. Then another. Megan laughing at something Sophie said. Daniel looking at them like the rest of the world had stopped spinning. The headlines weren't cruel, but they weren't kind either. Mysterious woman captures tech tycoon's heart. Who is the nanny that he lets tuck in his only child? Daniel dismissed them. Megan tried to, but the world beyond their quiet haven was watching. And then the knock came. It was a Saturday morning. The sun shone gently through the windows, and the scent of blueberry pancakes wafted from the kitchen. Megan had just finished folding Sophie's laundry when the doorbell rang. She opened the front door with a polite smile, only for it to vanish at the sight of the woman standing on the steps. Sharp cheekbones, cold eyes, elegant posture. The resemblance to Daniel's late wife was unmistakable. The woman's voice cut through the air like ice. "You must be Megan." Megan blinked. "Yes, and you are." The woman stepped forward, no smile in sight. "I'm Miriam. I'm Sophie's aunt." Before Megan could speak, Miriam's voice hardened. "I know exactly who you are. I've read everything. I've seen the photos. You think because you fed her once and played house for a few weeks, you've earned the right to insert yourself into her life?" Megan's throat tightened. She didn't answer. "You are not her mother," Miriam snapped. "And you will never be my sister." The words hit like a slap, but Megan didn't flinch. She took a breath, stood straighter, and met Miriam's glare with calm, steady eyes. "I'm not trying to be your sister," she said. "I'm not trying to replace anyone, least of all Sophie's mother." "Then what are you doing here?" Megan's voice didn't rise, but it didn't waver either. "I'm helping Sophie feel safe. I'm showing up when she needs someone. I'm giving her back the warmth she lost. That's all." Miriam's lips parted, ready to fire back. But then came the sound of small footsteps. "Megan," Sophie called sleepily, rubbing her eyes as she appeared in the hallway behind them. Daniel followed close behind, watching the scene unfold with quiet intensity. Sophie blinked when she saw Miriam. "Auntie Mary." Miriam's frozen stance softened for half a second. "Hi, sweetheart." But Sophie didn't run to her. Instead, she patted across the hardwood floor and walked straight to Megan. She took Megan's hand and leaned her head against her side, her voice a whisper. "Mama Megan, I'm sleepy. Can we go to my room now?" The room went silent. Miriam stood stunned. Her mouth opened slightly. "Mama Megan." Daniel stepped forward, crouching beside his daughter. He brushed a curl from her face and looked up, not at Sophie, but at Miriam. "She doesn't call Megan that because we told her to," he said quietly. "She does it because she feels safe. Because she's allowed to be a child again." He stood. "No one is replacing anyone, but Megan's given Sophie something we couldn't. Stability, joy, healing." Miriam looked between them, at Sophie holding Megan's hand, at Daniel's steady voice, at the house that no longer felt like a mausoleum. And something shifted in her gaze. It wasn't acceptance. Not yet. But it wasn't fury anymore either. Just reflection. She looked back at Megan this time, truly seeing her. Not the headlines, not the implication, just the woman standing quietly, holding her niece like she had always belonged there. Miriam's shoulders dropped ever so slightly. "I loved my sister," she said, voice softer now. "She was the best mother I ever knew." Megan nodded. "I believe that." "I'm not ready to accept anyone else in that space," Miriam added. "I'm not asking you to," Megan said. "Just let me keep being someone Sophie can count on." Miriam didn't answer. But she didn't slam the door either. She turned, walked down the porch steps without another word. But before getting into her car, she paused and looked back. For the first time, her expression was no longer defensive. It was uncertain, curious, open. Inside, Megan knelt beside Sophie. "Ready for your nap?" Sophie nodded. "You'll stay with me." "Always," Megan whispered. And this time the wind through the Grayson home felt not like a storm, but like a fresh start. The house by the lake was nothing like the Grayson estate. It was smaller, simpler, painted a soft blue with white shutters, a wraparound porch, and flower boxes that Megan and Sophie had filled with marigolds in early spring. The backyard opened out onto a calm stretch of water that shimmered with every breeze, framed by willows and laughter. Inside, the scent of baked bread often drifted through the kitchen, mingling with the sound of pages turning, crayons scratching, and piano keys being pressed without purpose. A year had passed, and somehow it felt like life had only just begun. Megan stood by the screen door, wiping her hands on a dish towel, watching Daniel and Sophie build something out of sticks and rocks in the backyard. Sophie's giggles echoed toward her like music. She had never imagined her world would look like this. She still worked, but not at the diner. Now she taught reading and writing at the local community center most days to children who reminded her of herself. Overlooked, quiet, but filled with fierce potential. Daniel had not only supported her, he had helped fund the expansion of the center, naming a new learning wing after Sophie's mother, the Clara Grayson Room for Hope. It was his way of honoring the past while investing in the future. He had also begun work on a school, one designed specifically for children recovering from trauma. Megan had helped with the curriculum. They dreamed together now, built things that would last longer than wealth or headlines. And today was another beginning. Out in the garden, friends and loved ones gathered. Just a few dozen. No tuxedos, no designer gowns, just linen shirts and summer dresses, lemonade pitchers on folding tables, and a canopy of string lights swaying in the breeze. Sophie stood at the center of it all, holding a small velvet box in her hands. She wore a crown of daisies in her hair and a grin too big for her face. When the music began, a soft instrumental melody she had chosen herself, she walked slowly down the makeshift aisle, her eyes fixed on Megan at the end of it. Megan wore ivory, not pure white, not too bold, just enough to glow. Her hair was pulled back, her smile as wide as Sophie's. Daniel waited for her with his hands clasped and his heart full. When he took her hand, there was no nervousness, just clarity, just home. The ceremony was short, sweet. They exchanged vows beneath the willow tree. Megan promised to love Daniel with the same quiet devotion she had shown when he was too broken to ask for it. Daniel promised to choose her every day the way she had chosen Sophie without hesitation. And when it came time for rings, Sophie stepped forward, presenting them with the solemn pride of a royal page. They slipped the bands onto each other's fingers, simple gold, engraved with one word inside, home. The applause that followed was soft but full of warmth. Afterward, there was dancing. Daniel, spinning Sophie around in her flower crown until she shrieked with delight, then Megan joining in. Laughter cascading over the lawn like sunlight. At sunset, they sat down to a meal. Grilled chicken, potato salad, corn on the cob, and a tiered cake Megan had baked herself. No place cards, no speeches, just three people holding hands around a picnic table as the sky turned golden above them. Daniel pulled them both into an embrace, his voice low against Megan's ear. "I didn't find you," he said. "You found me when I was lost." She pressed her head against his shoulder, and Sophie, nestled between them, smiled as if this was the only life she had ever known. The world had once seen Megan as a girl who gave away her last sandwich. But that night, without fanfare or witness, she had given away something far greater. And in return, she had received everything. She gave away a sandwich that night and received a family for life. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey of love, resilience, and quiet, unwavering kindness. If Megan's story touched your heart, if you believe that even the smallest acts of compassion can change lives forever, then we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to Real Stories Diary for more real-life inspired tales that warm your heart, bring tears to your eyes, and remind us all that love is found in the most unexpected places. Your next story is just a heartbeat away. Until then, keep believing in goodness, keep choosing kindness, and remember, sometimes a single sandwich can build a whole new family. Hit that subscribe button and don't miss what comes next on Real Stories Diary.